With the autumn upon us, it's time to start gravitating towards cocktails rich with baking spice and fall flavors. So stay tuned as we go over 3 of my original cocktails that are perfect for easing your way into shorter days and cooler nights. Welcome to Cocktail Limelight. I'm your host, Eric Castro, and today we're going to be going over 3 stirred cocktails that are perfect for fall weather. So if you like your cocktails heavy with fall vibes, then these drinks are especially for you. Now the first cocktail that we're going to be making is a riff on the Vieux Carré. It's a cocktail that I came up with when I was working at Rick House back in 2009. And it combines 2 of my favorite flavor combinations when it comes to mixing spirits, and that's apple brandy paired with Scotch. The reason why I love pairing Scotch with apple brandy is that you end up getting this really cool flavor that's reminiscent of smoked apple, almost like an apple pie. And nothing says fall like a tasty slice of apple pie. Now the cocktail itself is called the Full WINDSOR, and the reason why I'm particularly proud of it is that when you look at the recipe build, it looks like a drink that could have been invented 100 years ago. Which always fills me with pride, as I feel like it lends itself a bit of timelessness to the cocktail itself. And when you think about it, that makes perfect sense, as the cocktail itself was inspired by the cocktails of old. But no more chit chat, let's make one. To do that, we're going to start out with 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, followed up with 2 dashes of Peychaud's bitters. We're going to follow that up with a 1/4 ounce of Benedictine, as well as 3/4 ounce Sweet Vermouth. For our next ingredient, we're going to be adding 1 ounce of apple brandy. Today I'm using Laird's Bottled and Bond, but this cocktail works beautifully with Calvados as well if you happen to have a bottle around. Now lastly, I'm going to add 1 ounce of Scotch. Now it's just time to add some ice and stir. Now that we have this cocktail stirred to the exact point of dilution that we want it, we're gonna go ahead and strain this over a big rock in a double old fashioned. Now the cocktail's not quite finished because before we serve it, we're gonna garnish it with an orange twist. And there you have it, folks, the Full WINDSOR. Every bit as classy as the tie knot that it's named after. Hashtag fall vibes. Now the second drink that we're going to be making is called Blood of My Enemies, and this is a cocktail that I came up with when I was living in New York still and bartending at Boilermaker. Essentially, the drink is just a rum Negroni, as it's a riff on the Negroni template. And that template being namely aromatized wine, spirit, and potable bitters. But instead of gin, Campari, and Sweet Vermouth, in this cocktail, we're doing Barbados rum, Punt, and Amaro. And the result is a dark and bittersweet mixture reminiscent of figs, botanicals, and caramelized brown sugar. This cocktail is perfect as a pre-meal drink or even as an in-between cocktail when you're out for Mai Tais and such. And also, the name is Blood of My Enemies, which is pretty badass, right?
Blood of my enemies.
But what's even more badass is that the cocktail only has 3 ingredients and nothing more. And y'all know me, I always enjoy it when a cocktail can do a lot with only a few ingredients. Because in many ways it feels like it's punching over its weight as it's doing so much and creating big flavors with only the minimal of ingredients. And this complexity, and no doubt, is due to the countless botanicals and herbs that are in both the Amaro and in the Vermouth. But enough chit chat, let's go ahead and make one. First, we start out with 1 ounce of Punt. Next, we're gonna add 1 ounce of Amaro Montenegro. And lastly, 1 ounce of Barbados rum. Now let's add some ice and give it a stir. Now that we're done stirring the cocktail, let's go ahead and strain it over a big rock in a double old fashioned. And as for the garnish, this cocktail is going to be getting a lemon twist. And there you have it, folks, the blood of my enemies. Every bit as bittersweet as its name implies. Now, this last cocktail was created in response to the lack of tequila and mezcal stirred cocktails in the early days of the craft cocktail renaissance. And even years later, although there are way more options for stirred cocktails featuring agave in the spotlight, it still pales in comparison when you compare it to categories such as gin, rye, or bourbon. And you can tell that I came up with this cocktail a long time ago because it's named the Mance Raider, which is one of the characters in Game of Thrones. And if you ask me, he's probably one of the most compelling characters in the books, but didn't really get a lot of spotlight in the HBO series. And I mean, if we're being totally honest, after that last season of Game of Thrones, I think it's fair to say that I'm probably not gonna be naming any more cocktails after any of their characters. But at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, because as soon as the next book, Winds of Winter, comes out, I'm probably gonna be first in line to snatch it up. But that's like if it ever actually comes out. Well, that was a bit of a tangent that was not completely planned, but I guess it just goes to show that I do have a bit of mixed feelings in regards to how Game of Thrones wrapped up. But enough of me belly aching over high fantasy, let's go and make the cocktail now. To start with, first we're gonna do 2 dashes of orange bitters and 2 dashes of Angostura. Now, every time I dash in one of these videos, there's always a smartass who says, oh, you said 2 dashes of Angostura, but then you hit it with 8 dashes. No, that's not what I did. Here, when you're dashing a bottle of bitters, what exactly is a standardized dash? Now look at these 2 bottles. One only has about yay much liquid in there, and the other one is almost filled to the top. So you're telling me that when you hit this bottle twice, and this one twice, the dashes of bitters are gonna be the same? No, not even remotely. This bottle will put out a way larger dash than this one. One way to get around this is by using these Japanese dasher bottles. The beauty of these bottles is that they're calibrated so that about 3 or 4 hits will give you the equivalent of a standardized dash. So because of that, in order to achieve some semblance of consistency in our cocktails, by using these bottles, it helps us nail that as closely as we can. And we can do that by doing about 3 or 4 pulls to equal the dash. So I hope that that helps shed a little bit of light onto why it looks like I'm hitting it with 4 dashes when I actually said 1 dash, right? So you can do the math based off of that. Getting back to the cocktail. Let's do 1/2 of Dry Curaçao, 1/2 ounce of Sweet Vermouth, 1/2 ounce of Mezcal, as well as 1.5 ounces of Reposado Tequila. Next, let's go ahead and add some ice to our glass and give it a stir. And now let's go ahead and strain this cocktail over a large rock before we garnish it with the lemon twist. And there you have it, folks, the Mance Raider. Cocktail with a smooth and satisfying finish, unlike the last episode of Game of Thrones. Normally I ask you what cocktails you'd like me to feature in a future episode, but for right now I want to ask you, am I wrong about Game of Thrones? Was that last episode actually altogether the last season better than I'm making it seem like it was? Because I feel like the buildup of it was so good and then it just let us down. But getting back on track, folks, there you have it. 3 cocktails stirred and on the rocks that are perfect for fall weather. 3 different spirit categories, so no matter what, I'm sure you'll find one that will tickle your fancy. But with that said, are there any other cocktails or any other seasons that you'd like me to dive into for a future episode of Cocktail Limelight? If so, leave them in the comments down below, and who knows, maybe it will be featured in a future episode. But in the meantime, be sure to mother that like and subscribe button. And also, if you'd like to dive deeper into the world of craft cocktails with me, be sure to check out the Bartender at Large podcast, which I host on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else where quality podcasts are found. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in, and we will see you again next week.